Giuseppe's hands trembled as he worked late into the night, his chisel gliding over the strange dark wood. The workshop was dimly lit, the single lantern casting long flickering shadows across the walls. This wood felt unlike anything he had ever worked with before. It seemed alive, almost breathing beneath his fingertips. Every stroke of the chisel felt like peeling away layers of something ancient, something that had been waiting to be uncovered. The puppet's face began to take shape, and Giuseppe poured every ounce of his grief and love into it. Marco, his son, had passed away only a year ago, leaving a gaping hole in Giuseppe's heart. He had been a craftsman all his life, but this puppet was different. It was personal. It was his way of bringing life back into his home, a hollowed-out shell of his former self since Marco's death. The wood had been given to him by a mysterious traveler who had passed through the village weeks earlier. She was an old woman cloaked in black, her gnarled hands clutching the bundle of wood as if it were something sacred. She told Giuseppe it was no ordinary wood, and that it had the power to create something extraordinary. Her words haunted him as he worked tirelessly on the puppet. When the face was finally finished, Giuseppe leaned back in his chair and studied it. The puppet had fiery red hair carved from fine shavings and deep, glassy eyes that seemed to glimmer in the lantern light. Its grin was wide, almost too wide, and its body was jointed with meticulous precision. Giuseppe named it Pinocchio, a name that rolled off his tongue with an eerie sense of familiarity. As he placed the puppet on the workbench and prepared to retire for the night, a strange sensation washed over him. It felt as if the room itself was watching him. He dismissed the feeling, chalking it up to exhaustion, and blew out the lantern. The room plunged into darkness, and the faint sound of wood creaking echoed through the silence. Giuseppe's sleep was restless that night. His dreams were filled with shadows and whispers, voices calling to him from the edges of his subconscious. He awoke suddenly, his heart pounding in his chest. The air in his bedroom was ice cold, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed from the workshop below. The door to the workshop was slightly ajar, though Giuseppe was certain he had locked it before going to bed. His pulse quickened as he stepped inside. The workbench was empty. Pinocchio was gone. He searched the room frantically, his hands trembling as he overturned tools and scraps of wood. The puppet was nowhere to be found. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a faint giggle, high-pitched and childlike, coming from the shadows of the workshop. His blood ran cold as he turned toward the sound, but nothing was there. He found Pinocchio hours later, sitting in the corner of the room with its head tilted as if watching him. Giuseppe's hands shook as he picked it up, but he told himself it was nothing more than a trick of his imagination. The following day, Giuseppe brought Pinocchio to the village square, hoping to showcase his craftsmanship. The puppet was an instant sensation. Villagers marveled at its lifelike appearance, commenting on the eerie realism of its features. "It looks almost alive," said one of the villagers. Giuseppe felt a pang of unease, but brushed it aside. This was his chance to rebuild his reputation and attract customers. That night, however, the whispers began. The villagers spoke of seeing a figure resembling the puppet wandering the streets after dark. A farmer claimed he saw it standing at the edge of his field, its head turning to watch him as he passed. Giuseppe tried to ignore the rumors, but the unease in the village grew. Children refused to play outside after sunset, and even the bravest men avoided the square at night. Pinocchio's behavior grew more unsettling. Giuseppe would leave it on the workbench only to find it in different places around the house. One morning, he woke to find it sitting at the dining table, its wooden hands placed neatly in its lap as if waiting for breakfast. The voices in his dreams grew louder, more insistent. They called his name, accusing and pleading all at once. Giuseppe began to question his sanity, but deep down, he knew the truth. The wood was cursed, and he had brought something into his home that should never have existed. One evening, the village priest visited Giuseppe. He spoke of the growing fear among the villagers and the strange occurrences surrounding the puppet. The priest offered to take Pinocchio to the church for a blessing, but Giuseppe refused. "This is my creation," he said, though his voice wavered with doubt. That night, Giuseppe awoke to the sound of laughter. It was coming from the workshop. The air was thick with an oppressive darkness as he entered the room. Pinocchio was standing upright on the workbench, its glassy eyes staring directly at him. The old woman returned to the village a few days later, her eyes dark and knowing as she approached Giuseppe's workshop. She told him the wood he had used was cursed, containing the soul of a vengeful spirit. By carving the puppet, he had given the spirit a vessel to inhabit. Giuseppe tried to burn the puppet that very night, but the flames refused to touch it. The wood remained unscathed, its grin seeming to widen as the fire roared around it. Desperation consumed him. The whispers in his dreams now spoke of a ritual, a way to banish the spirit back to the void. But the cost was steep. Giuseppe would have to sacrifice something precious, something irreplaceable. As he prepared for the ritual, the villagers began to notice the toll it was taking on him. His face grew gaunt, his eyes hollow. The once proud craftsman was now a shadow of his former self, consumed by the darkness he had unleashed. Giuseppe faced Pinocchio one final time in the dead of night. The workshop was filled with an unnatural chill as he began the ritual, chanting the words the old woman had given him. The puppet writhed and twisted, its wooden limbs moving with unnatural fluidity. "You cannot destroy me," the voice echoed in his mind. The ritual reached its climax, and a blinding light filled the room. When it faded, Pinocchio was gone, and the workshop was eerily silent. Giuseppe collapsed to the floor, his body and soul drained. The villagers found Giuseppe the next morning, lifeless in his workshop. The puppet was never seen again, but the whispers of its existence lingered. The children of the village spoke of a shadowy figure that roamed the streets at night, its wooden grin visible in the faint moonlight. Giuseppe's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of tampering with forces beyond human understanding. As the officers left the eerie workshop, a chilling draft swept through, and the faint sound of wooden creaks echoed in the distance. Pinocchio was gone, but his presence lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that once dwelled there. Could this cursed creation still roam among us, waiting for its next victim? Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned to Tales of the Continents for more spine-chilling stories that will leave you questioning what is real and what is not.